𝗙𝗵𝗲 everyone.
𝗙𝗵𝗲 everyone. 𝗙𝗂𝗘𝗘 for all attending today. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the brothers at the Sunnah initiative, inshaAllah ta'ala, for getting this done, for organizing this very important topic, inshaAllah ta'ala, that we need to discuss. So inshaAllah ta'ala, what we want to go through today is the origins of the Mawlid, the origins of the Mawlid of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is, for those who don't know, the celebration of his birthday. Before we even get into that, is my microphone clear? Can everyone hear me loud and clear? Maybe people can put it into the chat if they can hear me. Okay. So what we want to do, inshaAllah ta'ala, is we want to go through the historical look at the Mawlid. So we want to look at the Mawlid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from a historical perspective. And then, inshaAllah ta'ala, we will look at some of the statements of many scholars about the Mawlid. And then we'll speak about the ruling of the Mawlid. And then, inshaAllah ta'ala, we can open the door for some questions and answers, inshaAllah ta'ala. We can open the door for some question and answers. So before we get into the Mawlid, I think it's very important that we have a basic understanding of Islamic history, that we have a basic understanding of Islamic history. And it's very, very, very important that we as Muslims know our history and we as Muslims know where we came from, because if we do that, when a person knows where they're coming from, then they know where they're going. If you have no identity, you don't know where you're going. And that's why we have many problems in our societies, and it goes back to, or many of the issues go back to a weakness in our Islamic identity. But prior to many of us, living in, post-Islamic states, if you like, of us living in, whether it's the Asian subcontinent, Africa, the Middle East, many of these areas were under if you like, Muslim governments, right? Now, in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, the Muslim government, or the Muslims, were under his authority, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, now after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave da'wah in Mecca, he then went to Al-Madinah, and he stayed in Al-Madinah for a period of 10 years, and he laid the foundations of living in a Muslim state. And that's where you find the majority of the rulings regarding prayer, regarding fasting, regarding Hajj, regarding penal law, okay, al-hudud and things like that. So that's where we find many of our ahkam, of our actual rulings of what we do on a day-to-day basis. They were revealed in Al-Madinah. So after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dies, he is succeeded by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is a companion of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first man to believe in him, and he is the Khalifatul Rasul. He is the successor of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not in prophethood, but in taking on the affairs of the Muslims. Okay, and that's why he's known as a Khalifa, successor. So he's a successor, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, "Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa," that I'm going to be put on this earth a successor, somebody that will represent and uphold the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran to the angels after creating Adam alayhi salam. So what the way we can, if you like, categorize the governments of the Muslims in terms of historically is we have the Khulafa after the death of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which you all know. We have number one the Khulafa al-Rashidun, okay, or al-Khalifa al-Rashida, al-Khilafa al-Rashida, afwan, al-Khilafa al-Rashida. You have the rightly guided Khalifas, okay. So we lived in a time where, in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for a period of around 40 years, we call it the Asr or the Khalifa al-Rashida, the period where there was rightly guided A'imma or rightly guided Khalifas, successors to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These were the first of them being Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the second of them being Umar, the third one being Uthman, and the radiallahu anhu, and the fourth being Uthman. The first one being Abu Bakr, the second being Umar, third one being Uthman radiallahu anhu, and then the fourth being Ali. These are, if you like, the model of Islamic governance, right? Now, in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he in his premiership, while he was the Khilafah, he sends certain armies, okay, to different parts of the Arabian Peninsula to quell infighting amongst various Arab tribes who wanted to leave Islam and things like that. He dies after around 2 years. The next person to succeed Abu Bakr is Umar radiallahu anhu. So that's Umar 𝗏𝗏 that we all know, the famous companion of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He takes over, and when he takes over, this is when you find Islam really spreading across the world. It starts to spread like wildfire. So Islam spreads to under his rule. It spreads to Egypt, okay, and the Egyptians welcomed Umar when he came, and Umar put as a governor of Egypt, Amr ibn al-As, okay, and the Egyptians welcomed him, and they even the Muslims reinstated the Pope of Egypt, because of the fact that when the other people were ruling, the people before him, the different kind of dynasties, there was a lot of repression. So the Muslims actually gave rights to Christians. Anyway, after that, Umar opens up he opens up Damascus. He opens up, Palestine. He also opens up what's today known as Iran, Faris, in the Battle of Qadisiyah. We all know about that. So anyway, Islam spreads, and after that you have Uthman. Islam still spreads, and then you have the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, where Islam or the Muslims, there starts to be some problems with the Muslims, starting with the death of Uthman, and then into the time of Ali. Unfortunately, all three rulers were assassinated after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So that's Umar, who was and Uthman and Ali. They were all unfortunately assassinated, and some under very if you like strange the people who killed had very strange motives. People who are new converts to the religion, people who if you like had different beliefs and were very, if you like, irrational in what they did due to their strange beliefs that inshallah ta'ala one day, if we go through the different sects in al-Islam, we can inshallah ta'ala explore that. So that's the Khilafah al-Rashida. Okay, that's the Khilafah al-Rashida. So that we can call that the first epoch, the first actual, if you like, dynasty. After that, you have Khilafah Bani Umayyah. You have the Umayyad dynasty. The Umayyad dynasty comes from, or it starts with Muawiyah bint Abi Sufyan, or Ibn Abi Sufyan, afwan. And he is a companion of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he ruled from Damascus. And after some problems within the Muslim Ummah, he ends up ruling the Muslims basically. So Muawiyah ruled from Damascus, and the Ahd al-Umawi, the Umayyad, only ruled for around a century and a half, give or take, even a bit more than that. Okay, so that's the second part of Islam, and that's the second dynasty of Islam, and Islam, if you like I said, grows still. Then we have the Khilafah Bani Abbas. We have the Abbasids. The Abbasids overthrow the Umayyads and they take over. Now the Abbasids have the longest stretch of Muslim rule historically. They start off in Kufa, as a capital city. Their capital city then goes to Baghdad, Baghdad in Iraq. They're the ones who, create the city of Baghdad, and they have, Harun al-Rashid, the famous Khilaf, who opens up, Bayt al-Hikmah and things like that. And mashallah, there's a lot of reading and translation of different texts, and a lot of cross-fertilization at that time of different texts. And there's if you like, a boom in knowledge, and that's what they call the Islamic Golden Age in the Abbasid period, okay? And then after that, they stay on till the year 1517, okay, to the year 1517, okay. That's the Gregorian calendar. The Muslim calendar is till the Hijri calendar. It is the Muslim calendar. They rule until 922. After that, they are succeeded by the Ottoman Empire. Okay, khalas, no problem about that. What has this got to do with the Mawlid? In the third dynasty that I spoke about, so I named the 𝗙𝗵𝗘 𝗧𝗵𝗶, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Uthmanis, or the Ottomans, right? Why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because when it comes to the history of the celebration of the Mawlid, we find two times in history where they begin to be, if you like, promulgated amongst the Muslims. The very first time we see, or that many analysts and many Islamic historians, okay, speak about the beginnings of the Mawlid, how it became, because there's different reports. Some reports say that the Mawlid started sporadically in different places. Okay, so you have some ulama, for example, saying that it started in North Africa, it started in Spain. There's even reports of it happening in Faris, in the eastern part of the Muslim world, and things like that. So there's different, if you like, epochs and different, if you like, suggestions as to where it started. But what we can say definitively in terms of it starting from it being incorporated governmentally and spread to, on a mass scale, we can say this happened during the Fatimid dynasty. Okay, so where is the Fatimid dynasty? The Fatimiyya are in Egypt. The Fatimids are in Egypt, okay? They are in Egypt. And they take over, okay? They take over in the year 341 after the Hijrah. In Egypt, 341 after the Hijrah. So they take over Egypt. So what we have to understand is that during the Abbasid period, okay, you had the Abbasid Islamic Khilafah. However, during that time, many different small states started to pop up. The Abbasids lost central control of everything. At one point, they had all of North Africa. They had many parts of what we would call now the Asian subcontinent. They had the Arabian Peninsula. They never had Andalus, or we could say they had Andalus for a particular amount of time, which is Muslim Spain. But what we begin to see during the Abbasid rule is that Muslims are moving into different sultanates. These sultanates, these small kind of smaller states, don't claim allegiance to the Abbasid regime. So, for example, in Spain, Bani Umayyah, the previous dynasty that was ruling all of the Muslim world, keeps on to power in Spain. In the Maghrib, in North Africa, it is the Idrisis, okay? The Idrisis, who are still basically, the kings of Morocco till today. They're from the Idrisi line. And in different areas, you have different, if you like, dynasties ruling the Muslims. One of the Muslim dynasties that pushed the Abbasids out of Egypt are the Fatimiyun. Now, the Fatimiyun are people who claim ancestry to Fatima bint Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who they claim that they are the descendants of Fatima, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughter. But this isn't true. They claim that they are Alawi. They come from the Alawi branch of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family. But many writers and many experts on the if you like the genealogy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family in that time said that this doesn't appear to be the case. And in fact, a better name for them, the Fatimids, is the Ubaydiyun. They're known as the Ubaydiyun. Okay, this is a better name for them, Al-Ubaydiyun. So they are the ones who start to really propagate, okay, this belief that that one should celebrate the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birthday. So let's read and let's kind of see what scholars of the past spoke about them. Now, a scholar that I'm going to quote is a famous scholar of Islam. So he was a scholar of fiqh and Arabic language and all these things, but he's most well known for his history. He's most well known for his history of Egypt. This person that I'm going to quote is a scholar and is basically now the sole, if you like, he's the only source of information we have now on Islamic Egypt, which is in detail. His name is Al-Maqrizi. Al-Maqrizi. Al-Maqrizi was a great scholar, okay, of history and other Islamic sciences. He refused to. He had many governmental posts, but when he was when he wanted to start writing, okay, when he wanted to start writing history, his history of Egypt, known as Al-Khitat, the kitab is known as Al-Khitat, okay, Al-Khitat al-Qazwiniyya, as they call it, okay. When he wanted to write this book, he was offered a position to be a judge. He refused it to write the book. Al-Maqrizi names several sources of how he got his books. He mentioned the sources. His sources, he mentions them. But as with many Islamic texts, because of the vast nature and the, if you like, it was bountiful, the amount of books that were in the Muslim world at that time. In the time of the Muslim world, it was plentiful. There were thousands upon thousands of manuscripts. And what happened is during as the centuries go by, 700, 800, 900 years, many of these manuscripts become destroyed or lost, right? So what ends up happening is that Al-Maqrizi takes from many of the manuscripts of his day. He takes from many of the historians that came before him. However, all of those manuscripts that belong to those historians and those scholars of history, Muslim history, disappear. They disappear, and Al-Maqrizi's book remains. So now his book is seen as an authority because of how much he wrote. He literally wrote hundreds upon hundreds of works. They say that his works number 200, but in terms of pages, then they're volume after volume. So let's discuss what Al-Maqrizi says. Al-Maqrizi, he says, وكان خلفاء الفاطميين في طول السنة أعياد ومواسم. Okay, that in every throughout the year, the khulafa of the Fatimiyya, the governors and the rulers and the Islamic or the government of the time, because we're going to speak about whether they were Islamic or not from the Muslim scholars. But he says that the Khilafa, the Fatimi Khilafa, okay, which lasted, I would say, about 160, 170 years. So it starts at the year 341 after the Hijrah, and it goes on for give and take 150, 160, 170 years, give or take, right? And it's actually ended, the Fatimi rule in Egypt is ended by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, who fought the Crusaders and took back Palestine and all those areas that were taken. And one of the things that the scholars actually say and the historians say about the Fatimiyya was based upon their heretical beliefs. They gave no care to the Muslim world. They were just concerned with ruling Egypt and plundering Egypt for its resources. But that's a whole other discussion, inshallah ta'ala. So Al-Maqrizi, he goes into, he says, كان الخلفاء الفاطميين في طول السنة أعياد ومواسم. That throughout the year, okay, the Fatimiyas had they had several, if you like, festivals and several different celebrations. Number one, they had Eid Ra's al-Sana or Mawsim Ra's al-Sana. Okay, so every new year they would have a celebration. ومواسم أول العام. Okay, and they would have what do you call it again? You know, yearly celebrations, like a New Year celebration or the first month of the year celebration. And they would have a celebration for Yawm Ashura. So Yawm Ashura, they'll celebrate it like it's an Eid. ومولد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And they would also celebrate the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birthday. What else did they celebrate? Let's see what else they celebrated. ومولد علي بن أبي طالب. So these people who introduced the Fatimids, who introduced the Mawlid, they didn't just celebrate the Mawlid, they celebrated the New Year, they celebrated the Prophet's birthday, they celebrated Ashura, and they celebrated the birthday of Ali bin Abi Talib. Why did they do that, you may ask? We'll find that out later. They also celebrated the Mawlid of Hassan wal Hussein. They would also celebrate the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein, who are the children of Ali radiallahu anhu and Fatima radiallahu anha. ومولد فاطمة الزهراء. Okay, and they would also celebrate the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughter. Okay, ومولد خليفة الحاضر, and they would also what do you call it, celebrate the birthday of the Khalifa. Okay, and you can find this quote in the book known as 𝗙𝗏𝗘𝗘, 𝗙𝗏𝗘𝗘 خاف طاء. Okay, in the first volume around the page 490. Okay, so this is what they said. Now, this is how they would celebrate. Now, were their celebrations, was it only to the people in the palaces, or did everyone in, you know, up and down, you know, the land have to kind of celebrate the Mawlid? And what he goes on to say, Al-Maqrizi, he goes on to say, وفي ربيع الأول, in the third month of the Hijrah, ألزم الناس بوقود القناديل بالليل وفي سائر الشوارع وفي الأزقة بمصر. He said that in the third month of the Hijrah, when they would celebrate their birthday, the birth of Prophet ﷺ, they would order people to light candles and lamps, al-qanadil. And they would order them to do that at night time, to light up the night. And he ordered the Khalifa ordered that to be done throughout all of Egypt, in all of the streets of Egypt, and all of like the alleyways, the, you know, the back alleys and things like that. So all of, you know, it was something which was state sponsored. So this is a small kind of little look at how the Mawlid started. Then in the dynasty, the sultanates, some of the sultanate dynasties that happened in the time of the Mamalik, some of the descendants of Salahuddin, or from the same family of Salahuddin, they introduced the Mawlid as well. But in the very beginning, it started from the Fatimiyya. Number one, who are the Fatimiyya? The Fatimiyya were a Shia group from who started in North Africa. Well, that's the Fatimids of what do you call it? That's the Ismailis of North Africa. The Fatimids are a substrata of Shia. Okay, the Fatimids are a substrata of Shia. They came in many forms. Okay, they are a form of Shia known as Ismailis. They are Ismailis. Okay, so if you're asked, they are called Ismailis. They're Ismailis. Now, the first time we hear about the Ismailis are the crimes they commit in Mecca. The Ismaili group, of which the Fatimids come from, they appear, when it comes to appear, they appeared in many parts of the Muslim world. But one of the things that shocked many people is the Ismailis, okay, They appear in what is now Saudi Arabia, in the area known as 𝗪𝗲, which is the eastern province. At that time, it was still known as Bahrain. Now Bahrain has slightly different borders, but in the past it was known as Bahrain. Okay, and they came from an area known as 𝗪𝗲 in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia today. And what they did is they came with weapons to Mecca. Muslim historians account that they killed 30,000 people in Hajj. Okay, they killed 30,000 people in Hajj. Okay, in the year 317 of the Hijrah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the year 317. So you're looking at about 24 years before they took over Egypt. They come to Mecca and they kill 30,000 Hujjaj, and they steal the black stone. The black stone that we kiss now in Mecca, they steal it and take it back to 𝗪𝗲. They take it back to, well, not 𝗪𝗲, what is now that area. They take it back to that area of the eastern province of the Arabian Peninsula, and it stays with them for 22 years. And the reason why we know that's the case is because there's many ulama of fiqh. Many ulama of fiqh wrote in their books of fiqh that they wrote, those early fiqh scholars, they said that it is sunnah to kiss the black stone if you see it, if you come across it, if it's there. Because when they did Hajj, it had been stolen by the 𝗙𝗏. So that's why they said that it is sunnah for you to see the black stone. You kiss the black stone. It's sunnah for you to kiss the black stone if you come across it. Okay, but they stole it. There's another book on the history of Al-Medina written by a sheikh known as Ahmed Yassi, and he said that there's also historical records or historical narration saying that they even tried to dig the grave of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to take it back with them. That's how insane they were. Okay, so they were an extreme group of the Shia. Now, this is what they were. They were a heretical group of Shia, and many ulama of the past كفروهم, basically said that these people are heretics and they're not Muslims because of their tyrannical, or because of because of their heretical beliefs. They were heretics, okay? Ahlul bid'ah, and they were وقعوا في الكفر. They fell into disbelief because of many of their beliefs which are not from the Sunnah in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Okay, so these are the people who are the Ismail. These are the 𝗙𝗵𝗲. The 𝗙𝗵𝗲 are a group of Ismailis. Now, they go to Egypt and they take over. Now, when they institute the celebrating of the Mawlid, okay, if you notice, it's not from, and this is the view of many ulama, that the Mawlid doesn't have its roots historically from Sunni Islam. Many ulama of the view that the Mawlid has its roots in Shia Islam, Shi'ism, إثنا عشرية, إسماعيلية, وما شابه من ذلك. So the ulama, they say that this actual celebration, from a historical angle as well, is a Shi'i celebration. It's a Shi'i celebration. Okay, it's a celebration that has its roots with the Shia. Okay, it has its roots with the Shia. So because of that, we can see that it's something which is very, very, very far away from the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we also said that, like I said, just to remind you all, that it wasn't just the Mawlid that they told the people to celebrate. They told people to celebrate the beginning of the year, 𝗪𝗏. They told the people to celebrate the birth of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of Ali radiallahu anhu. They told the people to celebrate Ali's birthday. Clearly something that the Shia would do. To celebrate the birthday of Hassan and Hussein and of Fatima radiallahu anhu, and to celebrate the birthday of the Khalifa himself. what we find, historically speaking, is when it comes to these masail, okay, these issues, in terms of responding to many questions arising around what we call newly invented matters, right? Historically speaking, there is a clear, if you like, there's a clear description of different things that happened in the history of the Muslims in terms of beliefs which did not come from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we can bring them from the very beginning of Islam downwards. If we look at the time of the Sahaba, towards the end of the last of the companions, so the Sigar Sahaba, okay, the Sahabas that were that lived amongst the Tabi'een, the very last of the living Sahaba, we find that something came around called this issue of qadar. This is one of the first kind of heretical beliefs that happened amongst the Muslims, where new people were entering into the religion and they were asking questions and speaking about matters that the companions never asked about. And they were creating issues that weren't there, a lot of them coming from shubuhat, issues that they had with their previous religions. One of them was being qadar, destiny. Okay, is a person, does a person have free will or not? And does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know about the future before it happens? Just all these different things that they speak about, right? That happened towards the end of the time of the Sahaba. In the time of the Tabi'een, okay, you had other issues that started to come out. You had the issues of the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila meaning the people who were in self-isolation, al-i'tizal, a form of isolation. They had a different, they had very weird beliefs regarding a person who falls into sins. They would say that a person who falls into major sins is not a Muslim and he's not a non-Muslim. 𝗲𝗶 𝗵𝗲 𝗵𝗲. He's in a place, he's in a, if you like, he's in a place between two other places. 𝗲𝗶 𝗵𝗲 𝗵𝗲, meaning that he's neither Muslim or kafir, he's in between being a Muslim, being a kafir, and that can't be done. Also, before we go back to the time of the companions, some of the other heretical beliefs that started to come up was the issue of the Khawarij. The Khawarij were people who believed that a person who falls into major sins, is a non-Muslim. And part of their aqidah was that Ali, can you imagine Ali, the cousin of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fell into disbelief. And their belief was, if you did not say that Ali fell into disbelief, then they would kill you. And that's why the person who actually killed Ali radiallahu anhu was his name was 𝗲𝗵𝗲 𝗵𝗶 𝗏. Okay, and he said before they killed him, they said, have you got any last words before your execution? And he said that I hope that killing Ali radiallahu anhu is the deed that gets me into Al-Jannah. This is the insanity that some of these people had at that time. You then move on to the time of the after the four Imams, okay? At the time, well, not just the four Imams, other than them, Imam Awza'i and all the other Imam, the time of Shafi'i, the time of Imam Ahmad. And you have this fitna of khalq al-Quran, fitna to khalq al-Quran. The fitna of people who said that the Quran is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is not the direct statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a long thing. Many ulama were killed. After that, you had other fitan. What's the shahid? What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that during these times, the scholars never wrote no Islamic writings or no clarifications on the issue regarding the Mawlid. Why? They wrote those issues because the Mawlid ceased to exist at that time, meaning that it was not something that they were doing. the Muslims were not celebrating, they weren't celebrating the birthday of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, people weren't celebrating the birthday of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it was not something that was known in the time of the Sahaba, in the time of the Tabi'een, and the time of the Tabi'ul Tabi'een. Okay, the first three generations of Islam, and it was not even known in fi asr al-a'imma, in the time of the great imams, the great compilers of hadith, Imam, Muslim, and all these great a'imma, the 3rd century. It was not known. It came around in the 4th century. Okay, and like I said, it was spread, okay, around, in terms of Egypt, by the Fatimids. The Fatimids had great control over Egypt, to the point where I've read some books on the history of even Sudan, because Sudan's right underneath Egypt. Even during the Fatimids times, the Muslims of Sudan were affected by Tashayyu, were affected by Shi'ism. So then we move on to the statement of many scholars, okay, who speak about this issue of the Mawlid. And one of the early kind of scholars who spoke about this issue of the Mawlid, you have scholars like, for example, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 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 is an Egyptian scholar, okay, of Shafi'i fiqh. And al-Fakihani is asked a question it's a small risala. It's only like one and a half pages. And he's asked this question on the issue of the Mawlid. And before saying whether the Mawlid is halal or haram, Imam al-Fakihani goes and he says that, look, what we have to understand about the Mawlid is لم يكن معروفا في العصور المفضلة. It was not known to be something that was done and was not well known في العصور المفضلة, in the times of the early 3 generations of the Muslims. It wasn't known to be the case. Okay, so it's not something that we can look back and say we have dalil for it. So he says that counts against it. And then he goes on to say the kind of singing and dancing that takes place is nothing that the Prophet ﷺ told us to do. So we're only left with one thing, he says. If we're going to say that it is wajib, that is an obligation, then as we know, okay, something which is wajib, there needs to be an amr, there needs to be a command from it. There has to be a command from the Prophet ﷺ or from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us that this thing is wajib, that it must be done. With other ulama, they say that the wajib ma yuthabu ala fi'lihi wa yu'aqab ala tarkihi. That which is wajib is something that you are punished, or you may be punished, okay, if you don't do it, and you must do it. Okay. So for example, if a person wants to ask about the salah, the prayer, we'll say, what's the dilly for this prayer? Then we can say the Prophet ﷺ said, in the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ sent the hadith of Mu'adh bin Jabal, when he sent him to Yemen to give the Yemenites da'wat al-Islam, and he said that, فَأَعْلِمْهُمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى افترض عليهم 5 صلوات في كل يوم وليلة. That tell them that Allah after believing on Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory upon them 5 daily prayers in the day and in the night. Some of them in the daytime, some of them in the night time. We also know the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. Okay, do ruku' with those people who are doing ruku'. Pray, the Prophet said, صَلُّوا كَمَا رَأَيْتُمُونِي أُصَلِّي. Pray the way you see me pray. So there's many commands that tell us that we must pray. As for celebrating the Prophet Muhammad's birthday, there is no command which is present. Okay, if there's no command that's present, then we should say that, if that's the case, then it could be mustahab. It can be mustahab. It can be something which is recommended. But again, we find no sahabas doing it. That shows it's mustahab. We don't find the Messenger of Allah sallallahu recommending it in the sense, because the Prophet sallallahu, when he recommends something, he can recommend it. He can recommend us, the ummah, something as either being he commands us in 2 ways. a command which is an obligation or a command which is a recommendation. We find no evidence for that. We find no evidence from the time of Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa. We find no time of the time of the Sahaba, the time of Hassan al-Basri, the time of 𝗙𝗵 𝗵𝗂, the time of Mujahid, the time of all the great tabi'in, 𝗙𝗵𝗵 ibn Kaysan, and we find none of this. So the question is, where does it come from? Like we said, if it comes from the first if we say that the first 400 years of Islam, this didn't exist, then we have to ask ourselves, what is the legitimacy of this particular thing? Now, some ulama have said, obviously, because there's many ulama who have said that, they wouldn't say it is a wajib. They'll say, if you do it, it's fine, it's no problem, and things like that. But we have to look at what angle are they saying this from, and what angle are the ulama that say it is not allowed to do. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم. Okay? والله غفور رحيم. Say that if you truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love you. Okay? So if we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way in which we show Allah is by following the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sunnah, as Allah has told us in the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Indeed, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the best of examples, okay? It's what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. So, when it comes to wanting to gain closeness to Allah and do things, okay, which will please Allah and gain us, okay, a greater manzila, a greater station in Al-Jannah, okay, we have to follow the Prophet ﷺ's example. Now, that's following the Sunnah. On the other side of that, what about if a person wants to do something that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't do? This falls into, as a form of worship, this falls into what we call a bid'ah. Because a bid'ah is ma uhditha fi ad-din wa laysa lahu asl fi ash-shar'. A bid'ah is something which is introduced into the religion that hasn't got any foundation in the Sharia. There is no foundation for it. There's no, there's nothing reputable that we can lean on to justify what we're doing. There's no dalil, which is what you call it, which is clear in its meaning, which tells us to do it, either from the Quran, the Sunnah, the statements of the companions, the ijma', the consensus of the Sahaba, and other than that. If we can't find that, we can't invent something from the religion. And based upon that, we have ulama like as-Sakhawi, ulama like Shaykh 𝗙𝗵𝗵 𝗏, you have other ulama like Imam 𝗪-𝗏𝗵, you have ulama like Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, and many of the great scholars who tell us that we should not, that it's not something that we should do, Imam Fakihani, and many ai''imah. Because what happens is, you end up doing what the Prophet ﷺ did not do. It has not been transmitted to us through the hadith that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would celebrate his own birthday. This is not what is transmitted to us. So inshallah ta'ala, my nasiha to Muslims is that we try to our best to abstain from doing the Mawlid. We try our best to abstain from the Mawlid, and we should tell our families in a way with akhlaq to stay away from it. If we can't change them, inshallah ta'ala, we'll make dua for them that they change. But a Muslim should not, for example, have a war in their household, have a war with their mother and father. Just don't take part. If they're asking you to take part, don't take part. And that's what I would say. And explain to them why you're not doing it. And inshallah ta'ala, if you have good akhlaq, maybe not this year, but sooner or later, they themselves will think and will stop doing it, inshallah ta'ala. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll open the door for questions.